Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Stefan Burns, geologist, geophysicist, space weatherman. Today, with a special report on what has been happening across our planet, because for many people, it has recently felt like a geologic reckoning. There are millions of people now which are paying attention to these geo events which are unfolding. We've had multiple high magnitude earthquakes that have been extremely destructive and deadly. This includes the magnitude 7.8 that struck the Philippines. That was back in June. Of course, the magnitude 7.2, 7.5 double that struck Venezuela later that month. We just had the magnitude 7.7 that struck Indonesia yesterday. A new magnitude 6.9 struck Indonesia today. Different location. Right next to Toba supervolcano, actually. We'll get to that. We've had high magnitude earthquakes strike Japan. The one that struck southern Japan, magnitude 7.1, was quite destructive. Bridges collapsed, a mall exploded, as you know. Then we had the magnitude 7.4 that struck Colombia back on the 10th of August, so less than a week ago. It has been crazy. That was very destructive and deadly. We will be doing a live meditation tomorrow, starting around 9 a.m. Pacific time, 12 a.m. Eastern time. I'll put a link to that. It's being led by Emilio Ortiz. He has a YouTube channel. There's going to be a few of us doing about a 70 to 80 minute long global meditation for that's called Colombia. We hold you. The link's in the video description. So check that out if you want to participate over Zoom. It's free. But it's been very active. We've had 53 eruptions now from Kilauea volcano on the big island of Hawaii, and this is all in the span of about 1 year and 8 months, which is a record for how fast that occurred, and it's also a record in the number of these lava fountain eruptions. This is video footage of that 53rd eruptive episode on the 12th of August, coinciding the same day with the total solar eclipse. We just had that. That was pretty wild, right? Swept over the Arctic Ocean, maximum eclipse over Iceland, then swept through Spain. Spain being the site of a triple eclipse over the next 18 months. We've had the first one. There's another total solar eclipse that passes through the southern part of Spain, Strait of Gibraltar. A third annular eclipse happens later on in 2028. So a lot of people right now are sensing a connection that's a little bit bigger than just themselves, because Earth has been so active and there have been so many patterns that are self-evident with Earth's activity just over the past few months. Of course, these patterns are always evident, though to varying degrees. But now with technology and the ability to share information and for other people to very easily share ideas and observations with others online, it makes it easier than ever to start to put pieces together. And well, that's what I did today. So we're effectively going to be doing an overview of everything unusual that's happened just over the past couple weeks, because I realized today that all of them are linked volcanically. And this is where we start to get into some speculation. I'll very clearly state that right from the beginning, right? So we're going to go over the facts of, this massive bolide that flew over Washington State in British Columbia yesterday, and the magnitude 6.9 that struck Indonesia today, right near Mount Toba, one the most deadly supervolcano on this planet, effectively. We're going to go into just simply the data, but there is a clear pattern here that to me is a little troubling, especially when you take into context the fact that as you go from solar maximum to solar minimum, there is a statistically significant increase in global volcanism. Now, it's not like volcanism increases 10x or something, but the records that we do have of large volcanic eruptions show that with the solar cycle, you have more activity during that solar minimum, which is after you had that big loading phase. Because solar maximum, of course, more light output from the sun. Not only that, it's higher frequency light, charges up the ionosphere. You get induced electric currents in Earth's crust, in the mantle. You also right now have Earth's magnetic field undergoing some pretty significant changes. And there are links between Earth's magnetic field and volcanism on this planet. So this is one of those other large drivers to take into consideration. So when I put all the pieces together, it becomes fairly compelling. Doesn't mean that something gigantic is about to happen, but in terms of my perspective as a geologist looking at this and wanting to forecast events to help people, because if you can forecast an earthquake and someone in that country hears that and takes some preventative precautionary measures, that's a really good thing. It could save their life. So it does look like we're going to be having some bigger activity in the years ahead. Of course, we had some really big activity back in 2022 with Hunga Tonga up high in the Tonga Trench. That's the largest volcanic eruption that's hit in quite some time, the largest of the 21st century thus far. But perhaps we're in for something bigger. So hello and welcome everyone. I'm your host, Stefan Burns. Let us get right into it. We are going to start off with Hawaii because this is where things are critical right now. We have a Category 1 hurricane passing over the Big Island. And this is the first significant hurricane to really hit the Hawaiian Islands since 1992. Now, I will state I'm not an expert on cyclone activity around the Hawaiian Islands. So, there's been other close misses, things of this nature. But we see the eye of Category 1 Hurricane Lala right here, just off the southern tip of the Big Island. And see, this is notable because it formed very quickly, right? If we look at our track here, that's the 14th of August, 5 a.m. So that's just yesterday. Then we go back here to the 12th, and we get a potential tropical cyclone, winds of 40 miles per hour. So it formed very rapidly. Now it's a Category 1 cyclone. Just for reference, if you're wondering, typhoon, cyclone, hurricane, they all mean the same thing. Cyclone's the official scientific term, but the local term is hurricane in some places, typhoon in others, whatever. Category 1, eye just off the southern coast there, and right now the Big Island is getting drenched. Huge winds, gusts beyond 75 miles per hour. And there are some estimates that rainfall could exceed up even like 25 inches. So there's a risk of mudslides, lahars, landslides, flooding. It's a big deal. So after this presentation, I will be doing a sound healing with my crystal bowl just for a little bit, but that's the right thing to do. So we'll say some prayers for Hawaii and for everyone else that's been affected by all these recent geo events. But this is really the first thing that caught my attention. It's like, okay, we don't get these sort of hurricanes to strike the Hawaiian Islands all that often, especially the Big Island, because it's such a big volcano, it steers everything away. The summit of Mauna Loa, Mauna Kea go way up there. So these cyclones, they're spinning, right? They have to now encounter that. It's not like it's just a little, maybe 1 mile like hump that they're going over. Like, these are really tall volcanoes, so they encounter that, and typically they don't like it. They steer around. This one is going right towards it, and again, we've been seeing a historic amount of lava fountain episodes from Kilauea since December 2024. Now, in addition to that, we also have had some big earthquake activity from the Big Island over this year, but the past 7 days saw a very notable earthquake, and that is the magnitude 5.2 earthquake that struck the Kamaehua Kanaloa seamount here, right where the hurricane is passing over. So there's a synchronicity of this hurricane, which we haven't seen a big hurricane strike the Big Island in a long time. In 1992, there was a hurricane track that went over Kauai, okay? It went like this. So some estimates are that this is the first cyclone to really hit the Big Island in like 155 years. But again, I'm not an expert on hurricane history, so there may be other close misses or something that someone could debate or argue on. that's not the point. The point is that we're having a very significant cyclone make landfall over the Big Island, which is right in the middle of the Pacific, and it's the world's largest hotspot. We had a 5.2 earthquake, which is one of the biggest to strike the Kamehameha kind of lowest seamount on the 12th of August. This is UTC -7, so that's my local time. It was also on the 11th of August for Hawaii local time, but it was on the 12th universal time, the same day that we had the total solar eclipse. And well, let's go, and this is the one of the largest hotspots and volcanoes on the planet. So what happens here is very much a glimpse into the deep earth. All right, so we have this synchronicity of the storm. We don't know how that storm is going to affect the volcano. We do see this connection with big cyclones, and sometimes they trigger stormquakes, and we really don't know. It's having these historic eruptions. Maybe there's a connection, maybe not, but it's going to be worth watching closely. And we had the synchronicity. Now, on the 12th, of course, we had the total solar eclipse. And this is interesting for a couple of reasons. Beyond just it being a spectacular celestial event. You notice that the maximum eclipse was over Iceland. There has been a huge amount of magma accumulation at Iceland to the west, exactly where this eclipse path cut through in the past few years. And there's been a tremendous amount of earthquake activity right at the smoke spine, which is where the mid-ocean ridge crosses into Iceland. There's also, of course, the hot spot there. This is one of the other premier big hotspot islands of the globe. So that is interesting. Another synchronicity of some geospace celestial factor, right, highlighting a very significant volcanic system. And there's also been some recent magnitude 5 activity at a big volcano under the glacier there. And then also this eclipse path, it went directly through Gokul Ridge and Gokul supervolcano, which is one of the largest supervolcanoes on the planet. So you start to see how things are connected here and are highlighting multiple big volcanic systems simultaneously in time, right? Today, the 15th, the 14th, the 11th, the 12th. This is all geologic terms simultaneously, okay? Let's talk about this magnitude 6.9 that struck Indonesia today, because this was off to the side of the big earthquake, the 7.7 that struck yesterday, and now the swarm. And so if we go here, you'll see a lot of earthquakes. Let's put on our 2.5 plus to see even a bit more. But we have 44 earthquakes in this area, cited the magnitude 7.7. The strongest aftershock thus far is a 6.1. That is likely to be higher. And when I woke up this morning, I saw on my app the 6.9. I was like, oh, looks like they got the 6.9 aftershock for here. Well, once I checked the map view, I realized it was actually a different location. Now, this 6.9 thankfully was not that big of a deal because it was deep. You notice here the depth is 172.5 kilometers. So people felt it, but it was mostly light to moderate shaking. It did strike near Medan there. More importantly is where it struck, which is right next to Lake Toba. This is the giant supervolcano caldera from the eruption that occurred about 74,000 years ago. So this is believed to have resulted in a gigantic bottleneck for humanity, where there like a massive amount of basically humans died, and we almost didn't make it because there's this genetic bottleneck that lines up perfectly with this eruption. So again, I'm not saying that this 6.9 is going to trigger the Toba supervolcano, but it's another geo event that struck close to a volcano, and it's significant. It's also deep, right? So it's not shallow. This is a little bit deeper in. You better believe a supervolcano like this has some deep plumbing to it, okay? So that very well could be related to Toba. Like we really don't know. At 172 kilometers down, it could be connected in. So now we have another supervolcano get activated. Of course, Gokul supervolcano in the Arctic, that was activated by the total solar eclipse. I can show you that really quick. We're going to talk more about our magnetic field. This is a project for that. But here's this supervolcano caldera right here. It's massive. And you see Gokul Ridge right here. See it cutting through, the slowest spreading center geologically on the planet. And you can see how this eclipse cut through. It basically cut like this and then swept across Spain. So look how it perfectly went along Gokul Ridge. That's interesting. It's very interesting in my opinion. Now, in addition to that, we had a bolide, a fireball, fly over British Columbia, Canada, and Washington, seen by some other surrounding states as well. This thing was bright. Viewer discretion advised. There is a bright flash to this, so if you have sensitivity to flashing lights, whatever, you're not going to want to watch this. But this is pretty crazy. So let me show you this fireball that occurred. And this was yesterday, just after midnight local time on the 14th. So here we'll see this fireball come in. Look how bright it flashes. Boom! That was a very significant fireball, again picked up over British Columbia and Washington. And it is suspected that there are some fragments from that, some meteorite fragments that are actually impacted and made it to the ground. So that's pretty crazy. Well, let me show you this. How does this relate to this volcanic thing, okay? Well, again, this is another like natural phenomena, right? This is another natural phenomena. And I actually find it interesting that it's a whole bunch of different natural phenomena, but they all lead to the same destination. Here we can look at a Twitter post that I did where I shared that video. This is from American Meteor Society, the event page. 266 reports came in for that. There's tons of videos on that. That's linked in the video description. But I was first made aware of this. I check that page basically every day, but I didn't check it that day because so much was happening. And so I was made aware of this bolide by Jason Wild here. And basically they picked up this fireball with the seismographs all across Cascadia. And that's because it had a large sonic boom to it. A lot of people actually didn't see it, they heard it. So it was a really significant fireball. And we see these seismographs, they picked up this, this fireball and the sonic boom generated from it. So you have massive volcanoes across Cascadia, with the Cascadia subduction zone then having created these volcanoes. I mean, you have Mount Rainier, Mount St. Helens, Mount Hood, others, right? There's a whole bunch. They all felt that shockwave. Like they actually felt that shockwave. Now, is that fireball going to set off those volcanoes? No. The point I'm making is more that the universe and God work in mysterious ways. And so this is kind of like one of these celestial messengers, maybe saying, hey, you got to maybe pay attention to these things. I'll send you a fireball to wake you up. Here we see the event page for that. This is from the AMS. And so we see all our different observers here. We see the arrow right there. So that flew over more from like the Oregon side going up, but we see people saw this from all over the place. Here are these videos I was discussing, okay? And if maybe I just click one of these and see what they said, because usually there's some interesting reports by people or they write out interesting commentary. I haven't read any of these. It was not like thunder. It was so loud, it scared me, and we just had a huge thunderstorm last night that wasn't nearly as loud. Felt like it could have been right in town. Wow. That's from Brianna R. So yeah, I mean, just to give you a sense of scale for this fireball, and this is what NASA has reported. They have a Skyfall event page. If you get more than 100 reports to the American Meteor Society for U.S. events, they create a page here and they look more into it. Hundreds of eyewitnesses in the states of Idaho, Oregon, and Washington, in the Canadian province of British Columbia have filed reports of a bright fireball seen at 12:48 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, morning of August 14th. And basically, a fireball first became visible at altitude of 48 miles above the Washington town of Soap Lake, moving north at 33,000 miles per hour. The object, they estimate, was a small piece of an asteroid about 16 inches in diameter, weighing approximately 170 pounds. Traveled 36 miles to the upper atmosphere before fragmenting 28 miles above Sims Corner. When it broke apart, the fireball unleashed an energy of 10 tons of TNT, creating a pressure shock wave that propagated to the ground. causing the booms reported by some eyewitnesses. And Doppler weather radar indicates that some small meteorites may be on the ground in the area. This fireball was not part of the Perseid meteor shower. That's interesting because that peaked on the 12th. This was a background sporadic meteor. They estimate based off of the trajectory and the orbital back calculations. So that is interesting. Now, also to point out is the fact that we have been having big eruptions from Mount Etna. Okay, so this footage here is from the 13th of August, and we really started seeing Mount Etna become active on the 30th of July. Maybe it's the 29th, 30th, whatever. It's all the same, basically. It's been active now for 2 weeks. Big lava fountains, as you can see with this clip from this live stream. And, you know, Mount Etna does, you know, activity every now and then. That's normal. But a 2-week eruption, this is one of the biggest in some time. And the thing that really makes this notable is the fact that this is the, that there was a magnitude 3.9 earthquake that struck Mount Etna today, just 1 kilometer down. So here we see some buckling that occurred from that on the road leading up. And if we go over, we see some more recent footage of Mount Etna. I believe this is from today, but regardless, it's been erupting for more than 2 weeks now, on and off, but mostly on. But this magnitude 3.9 earthquake right on the slopes 1 kilometer down, basically saying, hey, like something's happening at Mount Etna. That's one of these giant volcanoes of the planet. It's not a super volcano, but that is a big, big volcano. Now, one day after the 30th of July, which is when, you know, Etna really started to erupt, we had a record earthquake strike Campi Flegrei just to the north in Italy, which is Italy's supervolcano. So that was just about 2 weeks ago. That was a big earthquake. In fact, the largest that has ever been observed at Campi Flegrei in the Solfatara region. Is right where the fumaroles are, the gas emissions and everything. Mud pits, they're boiling, they're bubbling. It's quite wild. If you feel comfortable, you could take a trip there, check it out, as I did in 2017. But Campi Flegrei is really a big volcano, and there's some connection between these Italian volcanoes and Earth's magnetic field, and changes occurring to Earth's magnetic field affecting these Italian volcanoes. So that's where we get a little bit of evidence of how the magnetic field influences perhaps more terrestrial at the surface activities geologically. So here we see Campi Flegrei. If we zoom in, and there are multiple calderas here. Okay, this is that Solfatara region. The 4.7 occurred roughly around here or so. Again, the largest in modern recorded history. There's been 4.6s and 5s, like 4.5s and 4.4s. The 4.7, click up, it means more energy released, and there's been this acceleration and this exponential increase in earthquake activity, gas emissions, and uplift at Campi Flegrei since 2020. But even going back to 2005, we started seeing that go up, but it started to go exponential in 2020. So there's another big volcano that's having really notable activity. If you scroll down, here we see Mount Etna. This thing's a beast. I walked up the slopes of that and you lose your breath. You need to acclimate. It's a really, really tall volcano. I got out of breath when I was doing some running up there trying to catch up to someone. So 2 of Italy's big volcanoes being very active right now. Here we'll zoom back over to Cascadia just to show you some of these volcanoes. You can see them from space very clearly, right? So here we have some of these volcanoes as part of the Cascadia subduction zone. In addition to this, now we have to go a little further back in time for this, but it's still relevant now, is we did have that magnitude 8.8 megaquake which struck just off the coast of Kamchatka back on July 29th of 2025. That's the strongest earthquake that has struck since the Great Tohoku earthquake in March 2011. That was Japan. And in general, this is one of the strongest ever observed and recorded earthquakes. like with seismographs, and we have the data and everything. There's been other magnitude 9s and 9.5s, I'm sure, way back, maybe even magnitude 10s, we don't know. Strongest earthquake on record is the 9.5 that struck Chile, 1960. But this magnitude 8.8 was very big. Immediately after it occurred, we saw not all the volcanoes, we saw the main volcanoes along Kamchatka erupt. So this is Bezmeni volcano. We had Krishenikov volcano, which had been inactive for 600 years, start to erupt. It is still erupting now. And Shiveluch volcano has been very, very active now. It's continuously, basically almost every day now, blasting off an ash column about 5,000, 7,000, 10,000, 12,000 meters. It depends. But once you get to 10,000 meters, you're at the stratosphere. So it's having these huge ash column eruptions because it's building this new lava dome in the summit. I think you can actually even see this lava dome here in this footage. I think that might be it right there. That lava dome right there. See that? But it's very, very active, and it's still active to this day. In fact, it's one of the most active volcanoes right now. And it's certainly one of the most notable as it relates to these big ash cloud explosions. Now, in addition to that, of course, we've been having these big earthquakes, Philippines, Indonesia, etc. Now, I already discussed the 6.9 that struck near Toba. A little bit of a warning, maybe. There's no, that's not necessarily a sign that Toba is about to go or anything like that, but you pay attention. Now it's like, okay, we saw that, we pay attention, we see what happens. That's how I monitor this personally. Well, the 7.8 that struck here in June, Philippines, that was a very big earthquake. And then, of course, the 7.7 that struck right in this region right here yesterday, that's a very big earthquake. There are a ton of volcanoes in Southeast Asia. They are everywhere, okay? And those are powerful enough earthquakes, at 7.8 and 7.7, that those seismic waves going out across this region can activate and set off those volcanoes. So we got dozens of volcanoes in here. Some of them are fairly active already in a more day-to-day way. Not exactly day-to-day, but they're like, they show signs of activity fairly regularly. But we have, in just the past few months, seen some of them be a bit more active than typical. And maybe now with this new 7.7 and the 6.9, like that's going to perhaps increase even further. If we talk about Japan really quick, we have seen quite a bit of activity from Sakurajima volcano as well. And we've had big earthquake activity across Japan, mostly here to the north, but that 7.1, according to Japanese, struck down there. And there's a lot of volcanoes in the south as well. Now we've had, of course, Venezuela, Colombia, and Mexico with those earthquakes. Mexico is a 7.3, Venezuela 7.5, 7.2, Colombia 7.4. Tons of volcanoes all throughout here. You had Fuego erupt spectacularly after that 7.3 struck Mexico on the 17th of August. There was crazy electrical storms hovering over the volcano in the days after. Then a giant hurricane, formed right off the coast where clearly there's a big buildup of electrical charge in that area. Then you get hurricane, I believe it's Genevieve, form rapidly and just sweep across and become a Category 5 super hurricane monster, just going through the Pacific. We have the super El Nino right now, so the water temps can support these sort of super powerful cyclones. So there's a lot that's happening right now that is notable, and there's kind of like one thing to add on to this, which is we're not seeing something yet from Yellowstone, and we don't necessarily need to. It's a good thing that we're not. But when people think of big volcanoes, they think of Yellowstone in the United States, and well, we're not at this moment seeing some activation of Yellowstone. So that's a good thing. But that would be another one to kind of put into this list for it to be extremely compelling, and we're not seeing that. So that's good. But I did want to point out Yellowstone specifically and mention it because we are not seeing a big activation from Yellowstone. But perhaps that changes, and we could have a big earthquake strike Yellowstone at any moment. We really don't know. but it's certainly possible. But these are the locations that all are being simultaneously activated across a wide range of events. The fireball over Washington for the Cascadia volcanoes, the megaquake for Kamchatka last year, still active now, with Shiveluch volcano still very active there, Koshenikov too. The earthquakes that hit Etna and also Campi Flegrei, both very notable. The one that hit Campi Flegrei being historic just in the past less than 3 weeks. All the earthquake activity around Colombia, Mexico, Venezuela, and also Philippines, Indonesia, perhaps activating all of those. And the cyclone right now passing over the big islands, slamming them with high winds and heavy rainfall. So I just find it interesting that these different events are all interacting with some of Earth's biggest and most significant volcanoes. And then you pair that with solar minimum typically being a more active time volcanically for the planet. And solar cycle 25 put a lot of energy into this planet, for sure. That maximum phase put a lot of energy in. I want to show you something here as well. Here is the cumulative global seismic activity level going from 2020 to 2026. I'm going to turn myself off. Here we see where we are right now. This is this magnitude 8.8 megaquake here. And you'll notice that 2024 was a weak year, earthquake-wise. This is 2024 right there. See these dashed lines? Those denote the different years. So this is 2025, that's 2026. Of course, we're not done. This is up to date for today. So it has that 7.7 and 6.9 that struck Indonesia over the past 48 hours. But you notice that 2024 was weak. It was a weak year in terms of earthquakes. Now look at how continuous and high these levels are. We're at these very high levels basically all the time. These are 2-week bins. So generally, if there's going to be one high magnitude earthquake in that 2-week bin, it's going to raise it up. But some of these do have more than just one earthquake in them, like Venezuela is a good example. That was also 7.2 that struck Japan. But you see these other areas. I mean, 2023 had really one 2-week period that was active. That's what pushed the energy up cumulatively quite high for that year. But you see these long periods of more quiescence, you could call them. And then you have this region here after these megaquakes that struck in August of 2021, this long period of relative quiescence there. So if you look at this whole area there, in general, it's a bit of a drop-off as it relates to earthquake activity. So a lot of people have been wondering, like, is this earthquake activity abnormal? And it's not necessarily, though it may be a little bit in terms of how deadly and destructive these earthquakes have been over such a wide area. It's not like just one earthquake like Haiti. I think that was 2010, where tens of thousands, suffered from that. This has been like all over the place. And Venezuela, Venezuela's tens of thousands gone, missing, still injured, right? That was huge. Colombia was big, not as big, but huge as well. And Indonesia's had these quakes that have been hitting Indonesia have actually been quite bad. There's death tolls from that and lots of destruction from that and more. But it's been very distributed. So it gives us a little bit of a feel of like, is this normal? Well, looking at this data, we can see that as compared to 2024, in our recent time frame, even let's say going back to 2022, yes, we are in a big burst of energy globally. Though if we would go back in the record, which we could do, I have these data sets for 2015 to 2019, 2010 to 2014, 2005, 2009, and 2004. You average this out and it becomes basically a bit homogeneous. But we are certainly in a very active time period right now. And so we're likely to get more earthquake activity as we continue down the descending phase of this solar cycle. We also see more earthquake activity around solar minimum. So keep that in mind. And we know that earthquake volcano connection. So the next few years are really looking very dynamic. And we'll just have to wait and see what happens there. But certainly they're looking very dynamic. The last factor to discuss now is Earth's magnetic field. And this is a background factor that's playing out across time. And we've seen this before in the geologic record. This is like a 500-year cycle, effectively, that we're seeing. There's evidence from some lake sediments that they collected way up here that the magnetic field, we'll zoom out a little bit, that a magnetic field kind of circulates through the North Arctic Ocean. Okay, this is the magnetic pole in the northern hemisphere, which is a negative or south magnetic pole, technically. But so there is some geologic evidence that, kind of circles around that this isn't necessarily abnormal. But we've had a pretty profound reduction in the magnetic field strength over Canada and an increase in the magnetic field strength over Siberia. In fact, this is, in general, the one place on the planet where the magnetic field is getting stronger. Of course, many people know that over South America, there is a massive magnetic anomaly called the South Atlantic Magnetic Anomaly, or the SAA. It has been growing bigger. It has two lobes, one centered here and a new smaller one that's kind of near Africa itself. So that is a huge dent in Earth's magnetic field, letting in more cosmic radiation. The field strength at its lowest is like 22,000 nanotesla. At its highest, which is actually Antarctica, it's around 67,000 nanotesla. And then in Siberia, where we have this flux lobe, it's around 61,000 nanotesla, 62,000 nanotesla. The average strength, you could say, is like 45,000 nanotesla, but it depends on where you are, the field strength. But we've had a rapid movement of the magnetic field. So here we see the data, that's 1831. This is the magnetic pole in the northern hemisphere. We'll look at the southern hemisphere next. I think I have that data in this Google Earth project. But we see 1831, 1904. Look how little it moved during that time frame. Only 0.76 kilometers per year, okay? Then here we see the movement from 1904 to 1948. These are where they actually went to these locations. They found where their dip compass, their dip needle pointed directly down. So these were in situ measurements that were collected. Well, we haven't done that since, I think, 2009. We'll look at, it's in this data set. But we haven't done these in situ measurements since 2009. Now we use our satellite fleet that have magnetometers and everything like SWARM to calculate the magnetic pole based on these measurements further up in space. But in terms of like boots on the ground, you're holding the compass and you're seeing where it points straight down. That hasn't been done for quite some time. 2007 is the last time. That's why this is colored yellow, okay? But here we see the movement was about 9 kilometers per year. So it started to accelerate there in 1904 to 1948. We see it's still about 9 kilometers a year here. There it's about 11 kilometers per year. Now from 84 to 94, 15 kilometers per year average across the time frame. Look at what happened in 1994. Sudden acceleration to 51.5 kilometers per year, okay? Then it really hit a peak during the early 2000s. You have 54.6 kilometers per year average in between these two in situ measurements. And then you have 58.1 kilometers per year right here, right around 2010 or so. Decreased to 53.6, and now it's going about 40, 41, 42 kilometers per year. But you'll notice that it is moving from this flux lobe over Canada to the strengthening flux lobe, because this has been getting weaker, to the flux lobe over Siberia, and it's now about to pass directly through Gokul Ridge near this ancient supervolcano caldera. And we know that this supervolcano is still active to some degree because we had a huge seismic swarm that struck in 1999. I believe it's still the largest seismic swarm to have struck a mid-ocean ridge in our history that generated 3 new volcanoes down below on the ocean crust, Odin, Loki, and Thor. And these eruptions are so powerful that they actually generated pyroclastic flows under like 4 kilometers of water, which is crazy. Think of the pressure on that. Still was enough to cause these flows, these pyroclastic superheated flows that then generated these glass deposits. And they actually went down there with ROVs and picked it up and analyzed it and realized they saw that the CO2 percentage with that is like 10 times higher than normal, which is why it's so explosive. Because the moment the CO2 at 13.5% it's able to dissolve out, boom, right? Normally it's like 1.5% dissolved CO2. This is like 15%. It's 13.5 is what they observed. Swarm occurred nearby in February 2018. This thing is still active. We have this magnetic field, the magnetic pole in the northern hemisphere, soon to pass over Gokul Ridge and Gokul supervolcano, unless something dramatically changes with its trajectory over the next decade or two. It's going to be passing over that in the 2030s, it looks like. So that's very, very interesting. If you go down to the magnetic pole in the southern hemisphere, you'll notice, and this is what a lot of people don't talk about, you'll notice that this was actually moving quite a bit back in the early 1900s. So for the 20th century is when this magnetic pole was moving, and the other one was relatively stable for like the first 50 years. And you'll notice that it shifted from being closer to the South Pole, like the true South Pole, the rotational South Pole, to now being just outside the Antarctic Circle. So this is the one that's lopsided, but it is moving slowly now. So now this one's moving very slowly. Here's the estimate going to 2030. So it's not moving that quick, but it did have this big movement here from inside the Antarctic Circle to outside the Antarctic Circle over the past 125 years. And I do think, therefore, it's important to point out that, yes, this magnetic pole has been moving quickly, but look at how close it is to that true North Pole, the rotational axis. So it's been moving fast, but it's actually basically exactly where you want it, right? If we're talking about a perfect dipole magnet representation, like this is a magnet, let's say, just like, you can stick it to anything or pick up a paper clip, whatever, right? Ideally, that magnetic field is with the rotational axis as well. It's the magnetic pole in the southern hemisphere, which is the one that's lopsided off. And this is the one that's actually shifted into position, whereas this one before was lopsided off. See that? Look at how close it was to being at the Arctic Circle, the boundary of the Arctic Circle back in 1831. So they've effectively traded places. So that's important to point out. But we do see with changes in the magnetic field, changes in volcanism, but in general, those changes in the magnetic field have been linked to excursions and reversals. So this is just a movement of the magnetic poles and a gradual weakening of the field strength. It's not at dire levels yet for any of those conditions, but these are changes that we should be tracking and, analyzing and studying into and doing thought experiments on and more, doing all the things. But when you get a full magnetic reversal or an excursion and then it flips back, that's when we see the most volatility as it relates to volcanism and increases in global volcanism and more. And that makes sense because the magnetic field of this planet, from the inside of the Earth, which we really don't know much about, we know very little about, right? It's the energetic field that connects everything together, and it connects our planet with our space environment. So with the sun, with interplanetary space and the solar wind, with other planets, and it also is what connects us to the interstellar environment and the cosmic environment. Any cosmic particles flying in, like from a supernova, like far away, the center of the galaxy, these super high energy particles, they are still particles. They still have mass. They're not a photon. So they follow magnetic field lines. So that's why that dent in South America, they get funneled there because the magnetic field is weak, or they get funneled to the polar region. So think about how the magnetic field, right, in the northern hemisphere, which is where it flows inward, is soon to pass over this supervolcano, where you're going to have a whole bunch of cosmic flux blasting this area over the next 20 years. Now, again, we have evidence that it circles around and does this whole thing fairly consistently, but it's still knowable. And I can show you that graphic really quick so you can really see what I'm talking about, because this is an important map to show you. I just need to pull up the slide here. I just have so many in my folder. Here it is. So here is that circling that I'm talking about. I put in 2025. The original paper doesn't have the most recent location, but we can see based off of these sediment cores that they took all throughout this area that they reconstructed the polar position, and we see that it kind of goes through these circles through the Arctic. And sometimes there's these fast periods, just like now, where it quickly covers this distance. So what we're seeing now isn't necessarily abnormal. This is magnetic, the location for 200 to 2025 AD. All right. If I turn myself off, you'll see our virtual axial dipole moment, which is effectively, you call it the total magnetic field strength, going back to 50,000 years before present, BP being 1950. That's the standard. And we see that our magnetic field strength, while it has gone down from this double peak that occurred over the past 3,000 years, it is still very high historically. So that's important. And here we see this graphic, which is nice, showing like this this dipole magnet effectively represented within the Earth. So you get that sense. So look at how it's kind of offset a little bit from the rotational axis. Just kind of a useful graphic to wrap your mind around. So all of this is in general, kind of, in my opinion, indicating that we could be seeing some more volcanism in the immediate future, and we should be aware of that, and to take steps to prepare for that, because we already see with super El Niños, for example, we have a record of these going back, hundreds of years, these really powerful El Niños, that they've been linked to famine and disruption to trade and severe weather shifts. And I mean, right now, again, we're seeing this hurricane slam Hawaii, which is pretty rare, probably because of El Nino, the Pacific being so warm. So we already have these factors in place with the weather. But you get one big volcano, or you get two. You can have, and this often happens, where these volcanic eruptions seem to cluster in time. Let's say you get two back-to-back VEI 6 eruptions. I don't even really know what to say as it relates to that. Like, we're talking about volcanic winter. Let's say they're like within 3 years of each other. No, like we're smart and we pull through, but it's gonna get squirrely, man. It's gonna really get squirrely. If all you need is just one, but one or two or three VEI 6 eruptions, and like it's all of a sudden every man for himself. Basically, it's like Mad Max style. Maybe. I mean, we don't know, but we are in a very delicate situation. So I think it's really important to track this stuff. And when there are little signs and synchronicities that the universe is offering us, I think it's good to pay attention. And to just take some steps to be prepared, have some bags of rice on hand, have some bags of beans on hand, some other, good hearty food, solar panel setups and things of that nature. I think that's all really good to do. And what you do is, like, I just eat through my rice and beans, and then when I get a little low, I just buy another bulk bag. So you save money too. So there's nothing, you don't just buy this like survival ration food from the army, which is just junk, and then just sit on it as it rots. Like, you just get actual food that you can eat, just stockpile 50 pounds of it, something like that. So that is the presentation. Thank you all so much for watching. I've been your host, Stefan Burns, geologist, geophysicist, space weather guy, your cosmic bro, here to help you understand what is happening on the planet. I release video updates almost daily, so if you like to stay up to date, then please subscribe. Now, because of this hurricane that is hitting Hawaii, I would like to do a quick sound healing for them, and just in general for everything that's been happening. These big earthquakes, Colombia, Indonesia, Venezuela, like there's just been, and these heat waves and these fires all around the world have been devastating. I just think it's the right thing to do. So if you'd like to stay around for that, that would be amazing. But you are not obligated to, but I appreciate everyone who supports this and helps build that container collectively, that space, that resonance, because that's how we're able to influence and improve everything energetically. At least this is what I believe, among many others. So I have my sound bowl right here. And I'll just get this set up. But I invite you to get into a more comfortable position, perhaps, if you aren't already, or just to start to kind of wind down, relax, notice your breathing. Just how are you breathing? Relax your breathing a little bit. Maybe lengthen your breathing a bit, a little deeper. Let's do one breath together. So on, we can breathe in, breathe out. And on this next one, I want a full exhale. So fully exhale your lungs. Breathe in, breathe out. Get all the stale air. All the stale air. Get it out. Okay, and now invite you to just hold within your heart the energy of peace, stability, presence, awe of the power of Mother Earth, the benevolence of God. Just let me know how the sound bowl is. I can turn the volume down a little bit if need be, if it's too loud, like the gain is too bad. So we pray for everyone. Recently affected by these natural disasters. For everyone to be exactly where they need to be. To protect everyone in the path of these geo events, to be protected during them. I don't seek to change the earth and to necessarily calm her down or anything of this nature, but to have us work more harmoniously with her. That includes how we affect her anthropogenically and chemically and pollution and everything. We need to be better stewards of this planet. Together we create balance and harmony on this planet for ourselves and all life. Give our thanks to Mother Earth for all she provides. We have come from her and we shall return to her. We give our thanks to the sun for the light and energy and consciousness that it bestows upon us. Our thanks to the stars, the cosmos. Our thanks to God Almighty. Thank you everyone for joining in today. I will be back with an update, I'm sure, very, very soon. So hope to see you all then. Wishing you all the best, love and light. Take care. See you all in the next video. Ciao.